The February 3rd, 2015 Finance Committee meeting is now called to order. Please call the roll.
Okay. Rich Regan.
Present.
Arthur Perry. Michael O'Brien.
Here.
Rachel Morella. Mary Rose Mangia.
Here.
Randy Brockway.
Here.
Juliet Boyd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I correct? There's no public comments?
No comments.
And in that respect, I understand that Karen Valdez could not make it today, so that's one item off the agenda, so I know everyone's disappointed. And then, so we'll go to... oh, yeah, go right ahead.
I have a little bit of news to share from a conversation with Karen Valdez this afternoon. It was actually serendipitous that the weather prevented her from being here, because at 2 o'clock this afternoon, the chief sponsor of Senate Bill 16, Andrew Menar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, introduced a completely revamped Senate Bill 16. So if she had been here and explained to you everything about Senate Bill 16, she'd be talking about something that is, as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, obsolete. The next opportunity for Karen to come here and give an update to the board will be more than 30 days in the future, because according to the publicity, it'll take at least 30 days for the Illinois State Board of Education to rerun their calculations and do a simulation of how the new set of parameters would affect individual school districts. They've changed, they have a regionalized cost adjustment, changes to the low-income special education and ELL weighting factors, and they're also adjusting the bill to potentially provide additional funding for certain school districts that were anomaly school districts that were hit hard by the previous version of the legislation. So she said the bill has 437 pages, and so it's kind of serendipitous again that she's not here, because it really wouldn't have been all that fruitful. It'll be much more beneficial to hear what she has to say after all of this has been digested.
Perfect update. It is very serendipitous timing for sure. So thank you for that update, David.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Although it's really early, is there any indication on which way the newly edited bill is going?
It's more favorable to school districts.
Okay.
But it's very much speculation. If they change all those weighting factors for redistributing, if they don't add any more money to behind Senate Bill 16, which they say they are, but if they didn't, it would still be a zero-sum game. So for every winner, there would also have to be a loser. I think what this announcement is that they are looking at ways to put some more money into this whole restructuring effort. And the goal is to be more responsive to school districts that are in need. Now, when Massachusetts did a similar revamping, they added $1 billion to school funding at the same time. So that's really kind of the quandary. The state of Illinois is not in a good position to be putting a lot more money into school funding. So I think what they'll probably do is make it so that, this is my hope, that they make it so that those that are on the extreme winning side are not winning so much, and the extreme losing side are not losing so much, and kind of make it less of an, the extreme that the current version of Senate Bill 16 represents. I gave to you in 3 pages in the board materials the worst or on page 1 is the school districts that had the greatest percentage increase in state funding. Page 2 was the school districts with the greatest percentage decrease. And then on page 3 was where we are. And we're ranked 778 out of 941. And the midpoint would be neutral. So we would lose $789,000 per year under the previous version of Senate Bill 16. So I guess the answer to your question is, I think it's going to narrow this extreme, the dispersion of the curve as far as who gets harmed or benefited by the legislation.
Thank you, David.
Any other questions? Or? All right, very good. We'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the presentation of the fiscal year 2013-2014 audit by our current auditing firm of Evans, Marshall, and Peace.
And the weather prevented the independent auditor from attending the meeting. This bound document was distributed with your materials. This is I will get into a presentation of budget preparation and talk about how this document has been folded into the financial results for 2013-14. The auditor extends his apologies and is intending to come to a future meeting to answer any board questions. So at this point, he's unable to make it, and we can defer this agenda item.
All right. Wow. So then, am I correct? Do we have to vote to accept this audit then at an upcoming meeting?
Yes.
And is there a specific timeline, like do it by March 1st, or?
I don't think it matters. I think if you did it in May or June, that would be fine. At the extreme, just as long as during this school year you formally approve and accept the auditor's independent audit. But there's no specific time frame where the board has to take action. So I would recommend this be put off to the March board meeting for you to vote your acceptance of the audit, subsequent to a future meeting where the auditor can attend and answer any questions you may have.
If he wants, he can come to our February board meeting. I don't think we have any other presentation. Well, we can work that out. We don't have to decide that now.
All right, very good. So we will find a way. We'll find a date. What I recommend is that what we do is we find a date to present the audit, and then once if there's time to answer questions on it, then after that we vote to accept the audit before the close of this school year. Does that sound like a good plan? All right.
Can I ask Dave a couple questions just on, I've noticed the references in the audit to modified accrual basis. Were we doing modified accrual basis prior to this audit or not? I thought we were on a cash basis.
Correct. This is the first audit in the history of District 96 that is based upon a modified accrual basis.
Okay. And then what's lacking to be we're going to a full accrual, right?
No, modified accrual is acceptable under governmental accounting standards. So the accrual, the accounts and types of revenues and expenditures that are being accrued are now in compliance with governmental accounting standards board 34 or 45. So we're in fine shape as far as the accrual. We're in the process of having the fixed assets inventory and the other post-employment benefits. Those engagements with consultants taking place so that for the 2014-15 audit, I'm confident you will not have what is known as an adverse opinion.
Right.
Removing the adverse opinion puts this board in I think, a much better standing as far as being able to say that your audit is as good as any other school district, as far as, meeting the high standards.
So what's contributing to the adverse opinion now is basically the valuation of the inventory and the post-retirement health benefits, correct? Those are the two items, okay?
I had a question, David, and I'm glad that you can maybe answer some of these questions before they come in, and we know if you can't. But on page 36, they talk about the salary increases over 6% and excess sick leave, and they talk about an employer grant, if an employer grants sick leave days in excess of the normal annual allotment. What are they talking about with regards to the sick leave days in excess of the normal annual allotment?
Years and years ago, school districts had, on a rare occasion, granted additional sick leave days as a form of compensation or some type of a consideration, maybe even negotiated with a new employee or things like that. The teacher retirement system, a number of years ago, took a very negative view of that. So what they do is make sure that school districts almost uniformly grant exactly the same number of sick days to every employee.
So they were talking about the normal annual allotment would be those
Within
set
the
forth
district.
within the negotiated contract.
Right.
Okay,
In other words, you can't take an individual employee and say, well, we'll give you 25 sick days this year because you're going to have that as a retirement bonus or something like that. So school districts are prohibited in this manner from granting any additional sick leave days other than what is
in the contract.
uniformly applied to all employees at that given school district.
And so it looks like we did have some of that, based on the following paragraph where it says the district paid out the 1868.
I
Is
read
that
it the
something?
I read it the same way, but I don't
Yeah.
know what it's from.
Yeah, and I was, what does that represent?
And I will get back to you on that.
Thank you very much.
That's,
That's the first time I've heard you say that, David. We
okay.
normally have it on the
You
spot.
stumped it.
No, I did not
Sorry.
have.
Well, I was just wondering what that was, because it seemed to be a strange thing. All right, then my next question for you is the, on page 54, they're talking about capital outlay, and it looks like our actual expenditure for 2014 is being $5,477,799. What does that number or figure represent? On page 54.
Well, that's in the, if you look at the top of the page, it says
Mhm.
capital project fund.
Right.
That's your debt certificates. The school district had a $24 million program.
Okay.
The $24 million came from two sources. A $10 million issue of debt certificates going into debt, of which, and that'll be paid off in the year 2022. And then in addition to that, the board made multiple transfers of fund balance into the capital projects fund. So the beginning balance and ending balance are the money accumulated, and then 2014 expenditures of almost $5.6 million was you coming to the conclusion of that capital improvement program.
So
There's
the-
only one item left in that capital improvement program, to my knowledge, and that is new windows for Blythe Park School. But all other expectations for the fulfillment of that large-scale program have been completed.
But so this figure relates to the prior work that was done or completing the project, the renovation, prior renovation project?
Yeah, during the 2013-14 fiscal year.
Okay. Goes on.
All right, any other questions? All right, moving on to item number 3, the IMET investment potential loss. Let me guess, the IMET guy isn't here either.
And partly because he wasn't invited.
Very good.
Well, had he certainly wouldn't have
Okay.
All of our guests, well, no, we do have some hardy souls.
We
Made it.
We made the 10-mile journey from Oak Brook. 40 minutes.
Oh, my.
I would just like to summarize this agenda item by saying that my feeling is that the board has been apprised of the situation via emails, and those communications have made an attempt to clarify where we stand, but I would just, I think it's no news that there are more questions than answers at this point. I've been describing the situation as one that could be completely erased by bonds and recovery of assets, and everything will be held harmless for all of the members of the Proviso Township School Treasurer, the 14 school districts that have $2.012 million of investment with IMET. This could all be erased by the recovery of assets and by cashing bonds and other forms of insurance. Or, at the opposite end of the spectrum, we could be like Enron and Bernie Madoff, where there are people that are investors that actually get hurt. So we don't know. Within that spectrum of possibilities, it's purely, the Proviso Township Treasurer is expressing a great deal of confidence that recovery efforts will be successful, but I would say we should, at this point, just be indifferent as far as speculating. And you may note in the materials that I sent out, I did not agree with the Proviso Township Treasurer's method of valuation of our stake in the potential loss. But it's very clear that it's not finalized. So, but I will continue to advocate on behalf of this Board of Education with the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office that we use the exact same method of cost sharing as that which occurs every single year. We divide up among the 14-member districts the cost of funding the operation of the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office. Those office expenses are shared among the 14 school districts. Our share in the most recent year was 6.8%. I think that's the fairest way of doing it. Turns out that the date that they've chosen of September 30th, 2014, actually was a payroll date for us, which even makes the idea of using that date more absurd, in my opinion, because at 7 a.m. our cash position significantly changed by 5 p.m. once the checks were cut. So any kind of happenstance decision that would target a specific date, I don't think is a good methodology, and I don't think it's the way that burden should be shared. Again, there may not be any burden, or there might be a full $2.012 million burden. We have no idea where on the spectrum this will ultimately turn out. I'm very glad to report that the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office has agreed to provide monthly updates. And every school district is going to benefit from hearing through the Proviso TTO what IMET most recently has to say about the accumulation of confidence that assets will be recovered and the investors will be held harmless. Yeah. So on a monthly basis, we have a need to know more, and the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office has said, even if there's nothing to report, they will report to us there's nothing to report. And we will be making sure that they give us those updates on a monthly basis. So I think that's about all we can have, because
Yeah.
There's so much uncertainty. I'm hoping that as time goes by, those reports indicate a favorable result for all the member districts. And because of the complexity, I don't think anybody can reasonably expect this to be resolved even within a year. It probably will be, 2 years, maybe even longer, before the recovery efforts come to a closure. So I don't know if there's any questions by board members. I've tried to provide information to Dr. Sharma Lewis, and I know that she has been forwarding information to you.
David,
Go ahead, Randy.
it made the front page of the local paper last week, and and they said it was just recently announced, right? And then later in that same paper, the editor spoke about how this information could have been made available to us months ago. Can you comment on this? Are you familiar with the article and the editorial?
Yes, and I watched the entire 1 hour video of the Riverside Brookfield High School meeting. In my own opinion, there should have been an apology that the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office did not provide that information sooner. And to say, I regret that we didn't provide it sooner. It was a material and significant event, and we have a stake in that event. The response from the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office is that they didn't feel obligated to let all the school districts know because no quote-unquote loss has been determined. To me, even a threatened loss would have been justification or a good reason to apprise the member school districts. And I think that even now, it'd be nice if they would say, yeah, we probably could have told you about it sooner. I personally was not apprised of it because I didn't get wind of it. So I felt a little bit blindsided in December when I did get some information about it, and gosh, I don't know anything about it. So I had to kind of play catch up pretty quickly in order to find out what was going on. I think in a best case scenario, we would have been apprised of that kind of information sooner.
And we're talking about like September of 2014, right?
I think it was October.
October.
When that information could have, or at least the fact that there was money in jeopardy, that might have been something that could have been, through some way, just give the school districts a heads up. So, I mean, hindsight being 20/20, I wouldn't be surprised if they might agree that they could have let us know sooner. On the other hand, I can somewhat see their point, because even today we have no idea what our real exposure is. The seriousness of it, though, is that there's 300 taxing districts, or over 300, that have $50 million at stake, and we happen to be a cooperative of 14 school districts with $2.012 million at risk. And to me, it's definitely a serious situation, and one that I think is going to be rectified in the sense of communications by this monthly update. So it's very important, and I think the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office is very committed to giving us an update every single month.
So up till now, they have not provided monthly updates. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And the meeting that took place on the 23rd of January, where school districts attended a meeting at the offices, or the office of the Proviso Township School Treasurer. It was during that meeting that they did make that commitment that we would get monthly updates.
Okay, David, I have sort of a general question about the operation of the TTO as respects to investments. I think I read somewhere along the line that they do not keep separate investment accounts by their member districts. Did I read that right, or can you help me understand what I think I read? And I don't know if you want to use the microphone.
Oh, well, I'll stand up. And I'll give you what I understand. The Proviso Township Treasurer is with all other Cook County treasurers. They pool all of the cash of the member school districts and invest the money. At the time when they invest the money, they know what the cash positions of the respective districts are. And then so they know how much of the money that's being invested belongs to us, or belongs to RP, or belongs to Proviso Township's high school, all of those 14 member districts. But the investments truly are pooled, and so I don't really know the answer to your question, except that to convert it to, from this, this mass of money that's invested and reconcile it back to every individual school district is a process that the Proviso Township Treasurer does.
Okay.
And it's in their control to make sure that that's the case. I think the investments yield revenues to all the individual school districts, and those revenues are used as the basis for deciding how much we pay to fund the cost of the operation. And so if say, our school district has, $20 million in the bank, and if that represents 6.8% of the total, then one would assume that we're obtaining 6.8% of the revenues.
Correct.
That are distributed among all of the member districts. And that's, to me, that's auditable information.
David, so as I'm understanding what you're saying is the money that's coming out, the revenues that are generated are divided using the 6% number, right?
6.8 is just us.
Okay, right. So, because if they now want to use this 12% number, I want 12% of the revenues, right? If that's what they're saying it is.
What they're saying is that 12.4%
Yeah.
was our cash position
At that
as a
time.
percent on a particular date.
Date.
So that's not fair. I mean,
No.
it should be done over an entire fiscal year.
Right.
All of the revenues generated over a 12-month fiscal year time period, then that's fair to choose an individual date where you can have anomalies of the ups and downs of cash flow, depending upon when payrolls are timed or individual different types of revenues are received. That's, to me, kind of a chaotic happenstance.
But and from what I'm understanding, you're saying is if they did that calculation over the whole year and doing that relates to the 6% number.
Right.
Right.
So all of the money that gets invested is
Yeah.
done in instruments in a very completely pooled fashion, but then the township treasurer has the job of accounting for how all the money then really reflects what portion of it belongs to us. Therefore, we have an ownership of the interest earnings, because we should get interest earnings that is proportionate to our
Right.
share of the total pool.
And that's the
And
number that
that's
should
their
relate
job
to our
to do.
loss.
And it's their auditor's job to make sure that they're doing that correctly. And I'm saying that it is something that we could track, because you can look at annual financial reports of the member districts and see, well, how much are they obtaining as interest earnings. So, their interest earnings revenues are necessarily proportionate to their ownership of all the pooled investments for that given year.
So, David, can you give us any kind of an indication, a ballpark or otherwise, as to how much of District 96 funds go into operating that office, or operating that, that program?
I think our bill, I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I think it was like $56,000.
A year?
Yes.
56,000, okay.
David, is there a risk or any idea that there might be some cost to us, District 96, for legal fees or anything going towards this asset recovery effort that's going on, that could be a bill to us at any point?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I believe that if there are strong legal advocates for our interests, that they would fold that into the damages. They would say that that the recovery efforts have to recover not only the $50.4 million for all 300, but they would also have to recover what it's going to cost to obtain it. Maybe that will work, maybe it won't. And again, that probably falls under the umbrella of speculation. So I'll monitor it from that perspective and relay your concern, because if there's $2 million of legal fees over a 5-year period, then that certainly it would still be divided among 300 taxing districts, but who knows, that maybe that would translate into another $20,000 of cost for us.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just curious.
But it's definitely something to monitor.
One other question, David, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we have any, I know that with most insurance, criminal acts are potentially excluded, but do we have any potential, some sort of, any place we could, any sort of insurance that may be covering this event? And if we do we have any obligation to notify them of any potential loss?
That's a question that is right there on my to-do list.
Okay. There you go.
There's a potential claim for employee dishonesty.
Right.
Or rather, dishonesty of an agent or something like that. I have not gotten an answer from our cooperative, the insurance company, through Arthur J. Gallagher. I'm assuming Arthur J. Gallagher is very, very much apprised of how this is developing. And that's a question that I've raised, and I don't have an answer.
But the great thing is you've notified them of this, and you've raised the question with that's, I
Right.
think, that's probably just what our obligation is to them.
And the fact that, there's dishonesty involved.
Yeah.
Dishonesty is something that has, there is insurance coverage for dishonesty.
And who would be the dishonest agent in this scenario? Or is this IMET, or is this
It's a company.
Patel?
Patel.
Okay, there's company.
Yeah, there's that company committed, it's alleged, forging documents to represent that they were backed by the United States Department of Agriculture, and therefore they were permissible under the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act. So they were not backed by the United States Department of Agriculture, and upon further investigation, there's a questionable as to whether or not there are assets to back up the loan. So these repurchase agreements.
I have a question about those repurchase agreements. I'm not familiar with that as an investment, and the summary I was reading about IMET sounded like that they basically invested in government-backed instruments. Is the repurchase agreement, is that some sort of sketchy type of investment that we should be concerned that our agent is investing in? Or sub-agent, I should say?
I think that's a question. I mean, a concern was raised by the District 2, Riverside Brookfield High School about whether or not, IMET should have been a company that the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office was working with. And I don't have an answer to that. I think that as long as it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government in some way, shape, or form, whether you call it this or that or the other thing, as long as it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, then it's permissible under the Illinois Public Funds Investment Act. And if you say that this repurchase agreement is a loan, and the loan is through the United States government, the Department of Agriculture, then it would be, I think one would assume it's okay.
I just can't believe nobody actually went to the U.S. Department of Agriculture to verify that. I assume that, maybe I'm naive to believe that somebody would actually, go and check the information on that.
And that raises the question of how plain, how vanilla do you want your investments to be? And the less plain or vanilla they are, the more due diligence is important to do exactly what you're saying. And what happened was that the auditors did peel back the layer of the onion and then found it. So, yeah, so I really don't have a good answer for that. I think that one of the points that was raised at the meeting on January 23rd is that the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office will not put more money with IMET. At least, basically that investment company is being terminated, and they're I'm assuming using vanilla, simple, straightforward, Illinois Public Funds Investment Act types of instruments that are much more plain.
So, Chairman, I'm wondering, maybe for a future meeting, if we could have a presentation from David about the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office. Kind of a boot camp, if you will. I'd like to know, a lot about their operation, how many employees they have, how much they're paid, how they operate, and how up-to-date they are with current technology and so forth.
Randy, I just want to point out that talking to one of the high school board members, they have had somebody from the township come and present, and they said they will present to you all those things that you ask about. And I just want to say as a side note, this is why it's kind of important as a board that probably we should get involved and start going to Proviso Township Treasurer meetings, just to kind of watch them. And that's basically, I think there was a school board member from Western Springs that was going to their Lyons Township Treasurer meetings, and that's how he eventually caught on to the embezzlement that one of the former treasurer got charged with. So if we're going to continue with this township arrangement, which I agree, it's problematic for a lot of reasons, as we're learning. We should probably become more engaged with it and have a presentation from somebody from the township. Come talk to us about it, and maybe have somebody appointed from the board to go as kind of, we do with like the legislative type actions to kind of monitor what's happening with the township treasurer.
I would be interested in more of a, maybe a neutral presentation, like from David, as opposed to a dog and pony show from the Proviso Township Treasurer's Office telling us what they do. I would like to learn maybe from your own opinion, you know, how things are operating and how they should operate.
There was a plan, we had wanted Zach to invite the township here, and somehow it never happened. But some of it was just to get a handle on what the services are, because we have heard that the services that we're getting, that even in the world of township treasurers, like there are some treasurers' offices that do, provide more services, and so I think that was sort of the approach we were going to take, have them come here, learn what their services are, and find out, are we, we had heard that there wasn't, probably not a lot of influence we can have on getting better services, but anyway, that was the way we had hoped it would go.
It may behoove us to do both,
Yeah.
to see what they have to say, and then to have someone look a little bit more critically, either David or, it appears some sort of auditor did some sort of investigation. It would be interesting to hear a more critical analysis. I don't necessarily know that that's David's job, but somebody else. It appears that there's, like I said, maybe an auditing firm or somebody else that has done.
Yeah, I agreed and so noted that the next time we put an agenda together, a future agenda, that perhaps we invite someone from the TTO or from the Fiscal Township office to come and tell them what they're about, so we can ask questions, and then get a more critical
We're paying for them.
look at them.
We pay $56,000 a year.
The only thing I wanted to point out, you mentioned if we continue with this arrangement, I don't think we have a choice. And, just to put this in perspective, I'm not sure everybody's aware, but according to what I read, in order to disengage from this arrangement, it would require an act of the state legislature. So we would have to enlist the help of our Representative Mike Zalewski and maybe Steve Landek or whoever the Senate.
Actually, Karen Valdez, who was scheduled to come here tonight to talk about SB 16, is also doing some work on legislation on the TTOs.
Okay.
And I was actually as much interested in asking her a question about that as I was SB 16. So I guess.
Yeah, so noted.
Yeah.
All right.
Oak Park has pulled away,
Yes,
have
they
have they
have.
not? And so I don't think it's insurmountable.
I'm not suggesting it is.
The
but
task.
I think you need to keep in perspective what's involved, and it's not just something we directly decide, this year we're going to not use the TTO. We're going
I
to do
understand
this.
that.
And Oak Park,
I'm not sure everybody does. I just want, it's for the benefit of everyone in the
Oak Park,
audience.
what happened was they were part of the Cicero Township, and there was fraud or something, so they just simply disbanded the Cicero Township. And that's sort of how, it wasn't that they pulled away, they sort of dissolved it out from under them, and they, I guess, weren't told to reform, but, yeah.
Which is interesting, because there was something similar going on in Lyons Township, but they still operate.
Well, I think the Cicero thing went away a long time ago.
Right.
That did also require legislation.
It did?
Yeah.
The legislation was passed.
Yeah.
And there have been some other passages of legislation, but you're exactly right. Unless the General Assembly votes in favor, then it stays quo.
But we did have a discussion too as an alternative that we can potentially hire a different township treasurer if we need be. I think that we'd maybe want to explore that as well. Somebody who has at least more up-to-date software, as I understand that it's a consistent issue with Proviso.
I don't think you can because it's territorially defined.
Is it
I think
like
it's,
that?
I think it's a geography. I think the only way you can go to another township treasurer is if a piece of our attendance boundaries fell within the jurisdiction of another
Well,
township
we
treasurer's
could go to Lyons
office.
Township treasurer because I think a piece of our jurisdiction is in Lyons Township, a small piece.
If that's the case,
Yeah.
then yes.
Is that jumping out of the
Also-
frying pan into the fire?
Right, exactly.
So Rachel, I guess I share your concern, and this board has talked about this in the past, more than once.
Yeah, I don't think anyone looks favorably upon any TTO office on
Right,
on
but
this
this
board. I
might-
don't mean to speak for everybody, but
No,
it's very
true.
frustrating.
Well, this might be,
experience.
this whole IMET thing might be the jumping off point where we might be able to form some cooperative and who knows?
I agree. What I was meaning to say by bringing that whole point up is that if we want to pursue this, I think we need to start talking to, our lobbyist representatives from EdRed, talking to our local state representative and senator, because I don't see any other way around making that happen.
Yeah, I think I did bring it up to Mike Zaleski once, and he basically said, give me a draft of some legislation, and I'll run it up there.
Sure.
So again, I'm like, okay.
You got a couple lawyers on board, you guys can
So
rustle
that's
that
why,
up,
like I
right?
said, it would be interesting to hear what Karen's up to. Yes,
Your last version, I think Karen would agree.
You're off.
Not very up, no, read a lot, but.
I think there's a version that is being proposed through the Illinois Association of School Boards. And that version is advocating that a school district, upon passage of a referendum within its attendance boundaries, a majority vote of its, within that school district, would then have an option to disengage from a given township treasurer's office.
Really?
I thought that was probably one that legislators might look more favorably upon because it definitely reflects the intention or the desire of the voting public.
yeah, well, anyway, we kind of move on. I thought I read that it was not something that either of the leaders of the Senate or the House were interested in putting on their legislative agenda either. So, I mean, it's,
Frustrating.
yeah, just we'll see where it goes.
But, just as a last point, the article and the editorial that was in the Landmark was very critical, and the public is reading what we read. I guess I would not want to just push this aside. I would like to have it on an upcoming agenda and take it through a course of action.
With the, I agree. I mean, the ultimate objective would be trying to get rid of affiliation with the TTO, so. Very good. All right, we'll move off item agenda 3 and move over to item agenda 4, the architect and facilities summer 2015 planning update.
And I'll just introduce Paul Fiscal and Stephanie.
Burner.
Sorry. And take it away, Paul.
So, since the last time we were here, when you approved our contract, thank you very much. We're very excited to be here, starting to get our feet wet. We've been meeting with staff and going through the buildings, and again, very high level look at all the facilities. We met last week with David and Badna and staff and talked about, just where you see the immediate needs. And the 3 areas that were brought were roofing at Blythe, paving all over the district, and then the 10-year life safety. So what you have in front of you, when we started looking at the numbers, I did some very high-level estimates, high-low estimates, when we started looking at facilities, and then we kind of determined that roofing is really at the top of the list right now, because we do have some active leaks, we believe, over at Blythe in the bathtub areas, which were, I guess, just done back in 2001, which is kind of surprising looking at the type of roof it is. So we are in the process of doing that. We put together a budget number for some budgets for consideration, or a proposal for consideration, part of our contract. Moving forward, as we do projects, we bring an amendment to our contract. We kind of just have a blanket contract in place. So looking at the timing, I want to get something in front of you so that if we do need to make a decision moving forward, we can get that in place so we can get drawing started around after the 17th. But again, kind of a high level, looking at the last page, we do know it's a historic building, so we have to deal with some of that. We know we have to work with the commission, the local preservation commission. just in terms of going through, but I did talk to Sonia over there at the office. On Friday, I spoke with her and just got kind of an update of what they're looking for, and it sounds like it's just a matter of getting on the agenda and bringing a sample of the type of materials. Because I did talk to her about, we do want to bring it up to current energy code if we do that. We want to try and match what's there, certainly. From a material standpoint, we know it's a lot of integral gutters, which we know, I can tell by walking around the building first sight that there is a little bit of damage to some of the soffits. So it gives me an indication that it either leaked previously or is leaking. We are planning over the next week or so here to get together with a roofing contractor and our roof specialist to go out there and, kind of get our feet on the ground and get a number together.
There's 2 roofing contractors.
Yeah, I had one.
Ridgeworth and National Roof.
And National.
2 contractors inspected. Sorry.
Right, no problem. So on the last page, I have basically kind of a high-low, looking at just roofing system by roof area. And again, I kind of went back to the concept, the previous architect's roof report from 2012, which in 2012 said there was about 2 years left on pretty much all the roof systems. And so now we're going into 2015, and we're actually going into a year past. Not uncommon. We do roof reports all the time, and we typically look at roofs again over a period of time, and as we assess those, sometimes with just some maintenance, you can get by a little bit longer, but we do know there is some leaking, so we're hoping that when we go out here with the contractors, we can nail that down. So, and again, it just depends on how much we can save. If we don't have to replace all the copper on the integral gutters, and we can do something where we can line them and then just do a trim piece on the outside, that might get us into the more lower level estimate, whereas the higher one would be, we have to do something more drastic. And again, until we really get into the details, hopefully not any destructive testing, but if it's necessary, we would look into that. In terms of the paving, as we talked about tabling potentially any paving work for this summer, just because of costs and dollars, in terms of your budget, what we have available to spend for next year, we did think it would be beneficial, though, to go ahead and get pavement cores done, so we can get an idea of what the subsurface looks like in anticipation for the following year. So we can get an idea of which areas are exhibiting, I guess, maybe moisture or high moisture content underneath, or something that we would be able to maybe, that you wouldn't see on the surface, that maybe need to be addressed sooner than others. So we are looking, I think, I've got the number over here, it's about $8,300, $8,400, I think it's $8,375 to do pavement cores at all 4 the campuses.
And if cores show some serious deterioration, and the areas we're most concerned about are Central and Hauser and Hollywood.
Correct.
Then we may have to come back to the boards and talk about doing something this coming summer.
Correct.
But that would only be after we
Flushed out.
determine that the conditions are that serious.
Correct.
So-
So that would help us.
Paul, on these pavement cores, can we also have a soil core done below that?
The analysis to test for,
Yeah, just to test for porosity and, because it's really the soil that provides the support.
Yeah, the cores typically go down about 5 feet or so.
Okay, it goes,
And then they give us an analysis of what the makeup of that is.
so
And
it
then they
goes
can tell
down
by moisture
beyond
content.
just the.
Yeah, it's below just the surface, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, good.
Yeah. And then when they're out there, depending on how far it's going down, or it may be, they may come back and say, hey, we recommend going down a little bit further. Typically with pavement, 5 feet's about all you need to go, but
Okay.
depending on what they run into, if they start running into really soft soil, they want to go down further and see where they got bearing.
Very good.
If they do hit some bad pockets, but again, you're only doing random areas, so, unless you did a core every 5 feet, which would be astronomical in terms of
No,
price,
it's
but,
it's pretty uniform here.
yeah, exactly. And then, so that's one of the items, and then we also talked about the 10-year life safety survey and the need for that. That's due in 2016, but certainly being able to get that moving forward this summer would be key. On our contract, I think we had numbers for elementary and middle school, prices roughly for that, and we believe it's about a $30,000 effort to put that together. So we may, looking forward to do that, so then, and then if we got to get go ahead on that, then we would probably look to be doing that work over the summer when the students are out.
I think we'd like to present a recommendation for that at the February meeting so that the architect can hit the ground running. I think the $30,000 cost will translate into their ability to observe conditions around our, in and around and throughout our facilities, which will translate into a good planning perspective for the future.
Correct.
And we have no choice.
Right, it is going to be due in 2016, so it's either going to be this summer or next summer, but obviously there's a lot of districts doing this work, and it's going to be an interesting year, 2016, so planning ahead would be good, to at least get the field work going and get that done.
What is involved in the life safety? If you could just briefly
In
explain.
the 10-year survey, basically walk through what we would do in this instance is because you just did have a lot of work done. I would look at, first step would be to look at the previous life safety survey that was done back in 2006. Look at all the items that were identified as violations. Check to see your drawings, see where they're at, and then we would walk the facilities again. We have to recreate because obviously not our work, so we can't, use that document other than just what you have on there, but we have to walk all the facilities, identify what's sprinkled, non-sprinkled, where all the exit signs are, fire extinguishers, things like that. And then we look for any other code violations that may be there. But again, we're hoping that based off that previous survey, a lot of that stuff is taken care of. If it wasn't, we'd show that to you, come up with it. We'd work with staff to say, what stuff can you take care of? What stuff do you feel you want to report? And then we kind of, tweak it from that standpoint. And then whatever's left on that list, we would then present. We have to put costs together, and then we have to input it into the IWAS system. Everything's being done electronically now, so.
We had talked, Rich and I had walked through and I think we talked about this last time, Hauser and Central, and we had some concerns about accessibility for disabled students.
Right, and that's really not, I don't believe that falls into that.
Doesn't sound like it does.
That's more of an accessibility survey.
So what would be involved? Would we be interested in a board in having an accessibility survey done? And what sort of costs would be involved in getting an accessibility survey done?
Well, I know walking through, I've seen a lot of lifts and things that we're in. It depends. It all comes down to what percentage of, and I'm not sidestepping the cost issue, because again, until we know exactly what we're looking for, I'd have to get back to you on that one, in terms of cost to do a facility study. But depending on it usually comes down to, depending on the amount of renovation you had done as a percentage of replacement cost. As long as you have a program that's accessible, you don't necessarily have to have access on every floor of the building per ADA, as long as you're meeting the needs of that student in some way. So if you have an art class, if there's a place to teach art to that student, as long as you have it covered, then from that standpoint, you're covered. But if you want to make every square inch of the building fully accessible, then that's a whole different,
I think
can you put an elevator in? What do you,
Yeah.
how many elevators would you need to get to every level
Yeah.
and be able to meet every level?
Understand that. I think, though, as our new architect, I think it would be wise to have a new set of eyes look at accessibility issues, whether it be part of this life safety or a separate study, because
Well, I can look in that and get back to you on something like that for the
I
cost.
don't know, is there any agreement?
I think
on
it's
that?
a worthy exercise at this point, so I think we should see a proposal on an accessibility study.
Okay, let me work on that.
Thank you.
All right, so our game plan, I see 4 items: roofing, paving, life safety, and accessibility study. On your timeline for roofing, it says February 7th. Why February? I mean, is this something?
Actually, I think we talked about 17 this morning.
Yeah, we did,
Okay.
and actually I had sent an updated version. And I don't-
Okay, that's fine. That means we have to approve it
Starting on February 17th. So,
17th, we
okay, so
approve it, and
assuming a start on February 17th, on the 18th, we would start.
Okay.
Right now, I believe the updated version, I have the design doc prep and the coordination with the commission and review running concurrently. It wouldn't change the bid phase target and the receipt of bid target.
Okay.
So it's just that first piece, so.
Right.
And if I can get through the commission in one meeting, and we can do it with very preliminary stuff and not too much high-level detail drawings, that goes fast.
That's fine. We're trying to get, see how fast we can get this off our plate so we can get going.
Absolutely.
So I would say that on the 17th, are we talking about putting that on the agenda, that we have to approve the roofing, the paving study, and the life safety?
Yep.
Is that what's gonna be on the agenda? And then also the accessibility study? Is that something you can get to us by-
Let me-
Or is that,
yeah, let me
or is that
work-
something we could do in March?
No, that could be done later as well. I mean, even the life safety survey, we can improve in March. I mean, as long as I have, just I want to make sure I have time so I can get people scheduled to do, for all the
That's fine.
walkthroughs.
What makes sense for you is that
Yeah, I think what's
if
more
we put
important
on
right now is
roofing
the
and
paving.
paving
Roofing and paving is probably top.
on the 17th meeting, that we approve it, and then we can go, and then life safety and accessibility, we handle on the March agenda.
Right.
So you can start ahead of that. Okay.
Yeah, I think so, that'd be fine. Or whatever your,
I think we're kind of within what I understand to be guidelines with the board to go ahead and authorize the court for $8,300. But I bring that up to the board, and I think just with the board giving an acknowledgement that they could start the coring work on the parking lot right away, because it's a lower dollar amount.
Oh, because of the
yeah, it's like $8,300,
It
right?
probably wouldn't be done, though, until the spring or summer, right?
I'd have to talk to my engineer and see when
Yeah.
with the snow, obviously, but.
It's really important to get bids on the street as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah,
right.
And normally you're working with an architect to get bids on the street and have them open
Yeah.
and awarded in early February.
All right, so for time and expeditiously speaking, that we can go ahead with the paving right now, because that's $8,300 falls within our guidelines, that can just be done.
With the core
Right, and I can
sample.
get
With the core
that,
sample.
I can get that work scheduled, and then we can,
Can I just clarify the
Get the time
paving
set.
project? That I understand the study and the coring is just an activity that's going to be done, but this is going to lead to a proposal for a project? And when is the proposed timing for that project?
Excuse me, if I could respond to that. First of all, we have to keep in mind how much money we have to work with, and the severity of the need. If we end up having to budget $850,000 to replace, every square foot of Blythe roof, then I'd say we probably want to have a lesser scope on any paving.
I'm asking what that is. I missed something, and I apologize.
We
if
talked
it was-
about
Depends upon the course.
Next year, we talked about summer of 2016,
right,
right?
I mentioned that, and we talked about, I think we talked about Central Hauser and Hollywood being probably first.
I think the only reason why we would bring forward a paving proposal for the summer of 2015.
If it's
is
really
the cores and
sample
further
and test
studying
comes
of
back.
current conditions make it
Yes,
advisable.
100%.
But at the same time, we may end up saying, well, we feel like we can defer that a year, especially in light of the fact that there's some, this is a huge cost.
So it's like basically doing a diagnostic test to figure out how bad the situation is, so it
Right.
can help us with our planning
Right.
respectively
Right,
in
because
budgeting.
visually, I think there's some areas where certainly you could do some crack fill and things like that would
Right.
tide you over a
Yeah,
little bit.
under the best case scenario is that on the 17th, we approved the roofing situation. The paving core study, not the actual paving, the paving test core is around $8,300,
Correct.
which we're well within our scope to approve. We want to do that because our best case scenario is to do the paving 2016, provided that test sample core comes back okay. If it
Right,
doesn't.
yeah, and
now
I'd
we're-
also like to see, a lot of times winter, does a number on the pavement, and it'd be nice to revisit that in the spring to say, Yeah, this area, yeah, it's really, it's in bad shape. We really should take care of it. When we walked through,
All right, yeah,
we walked
so-
through about, just before Christmas, before we got all the snow.
Okay.
We had actually walked through all the sites with my engineer and walked them down, and I mean, I've seen a lot worse. So, I mean, really don't think they're in incredibly awful shape. That, you know, there's some spots that maybe could be patched, but not anything
We can
that's
hopefully get away with it,
correct.
2016.
That's why we're
Does that make
thinking
sense?
That makes sense what you just said. I was confused by something that David said to do with getting bids on the street. Were you talking about bids for the roofing project, or?
Well,
No, I think you're, yeah, sorry.
well, what I was saying is that if the board were to decide to do any paving, you'd want to get your bids on the street as soon as possible.
Okay.
Hopefully we won't need to.
Right, I don't see the urgency until we do this test.
I don't see it either.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if it comes back and we gotta do some kind of repairs, then we gotta get bids out on the street as fast as possible.
I'm hoping that if something does come back, that it's a localized situation, not the entire district.
Well, it's-
Right?
It's likely
Correct.
to be,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the most likely, you're gonna have some areas
Yeah,
that
I-
require some patching and some that are
Right.
a little worse.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't think you have lots of areas with giant gaping, you know, potholes.
That would be bad.
I mean, I've seen,
Yeah, we
seen a
lost
lot
a
of
couple
paving, did a lot of paving
kindergartners
last
in
summer.
the crack that opened up.
And they were pretty.
All right, great.
Just so you know, and I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but if we find out that the condition of the roof of Blythe isn't that bad, and we can defer that, then we may be coming back and saying, well, maybe we should expedite some paving.
Right.
That's
Right.
fine.
We do know that both of those topics are going to need to be addressed within the next couple of years.
Yep.
So David and Paul, you talk about $850,000 to a total replacement of the
Worst-
roof?
Worst case, using the high-level budget number. I actually did talk to a roofer about roofing systems and gave him, you know, rough
Yeah.
ideas of the roof composition. So
Yeah.
I had a high-level number and a low-level number, and
Yeah.
it just depends on the condition of a lot of these copings and flashings and how much can be done or how much has to be done.
So,
And I also didn't know how much
yeah,
the historic commission would have say in terms of, you know, the original drawings, that was all copper lined. At some point, someone put an aluminized coating on it, obviously, to prevent, or some leakage on it. If we go to put it back, the
Yeah.
stuff that's down in the gutter, you really don't see, so that certainly, I
Yeah.
think, could be lined with a membrane and then just do a copper edge on the front. A lot of the edges have to be replaced, the rake edges, just because
Yeah.
if you do a tear off on the roof and put a new membrane, that coping has to come off in order to facilitate that work, and a lot of times you can't save
Yeah.
it, so you'd end up putting new
you
material on.
you commented that there was work done in 2001.
Correct,
on
down
that.
in the, I guess what we're fondly calling the bathtubs.
Bathtub?
The troughs. At the clear story windows, there's a trough area.
I see, okay. So the whole roof was not replaced in
No.
2001?
It was just, it was,
I think there's a typo on this, where it says 9 years remaining, that should say 2001.
based on, well, yeah, from
I'm
one,
sorry.
in 2000, right.
Oh, those are, okay, I'm sorry, those are the.
Those are just those
2001s.
two trough areas. In fact, what I did find on the report was there were some areas that were the modified bitumen roof membrane that had said it had 22 years left, and I was looking at it and it said 22-year life, so obviously they, you know, it should have said 2, and there was an extra 2 in the number, and I'm like, this roof was all done at the same time in '94, so.
The point that I'd like to make is that if you look at all the square footages and total that up, I think it's probably 90% of the roof is 20 years old.
Yes.
And going into its 21st year. So that's why, okay, we have a 21-year-old, in other words, if we're
Yes.
gonna do 90% of the Blythe roof, we might as well do the final 10%.
And we know that those areas, we know that one of the areas is leaking, so it's kind of one of those things,
And what is the lifespan of a roof?
it just depends on the system. A lot of systems, you can get a 20-year warranty on EPDMs, you can certainly get them on modified bitumen systems. I also wanted to try and do some research too on those bathtub areas because they were done in 2001 and they're only X amount of years old.
Yeah, 13.
I'd like to find out, and I'm not sure if we have access to it, but we're gonna try and, that's one of the things we're also gonna do this week, is look into to find out what warranty, if any, was there on that area, because if it is, and it's under warranty, we can get it repaired.
There you
And then
go.
maybe we can hold off and do some paving work,
I
so.
think it depends on the weather over those 20 years.
That too.
I've always disagreed with architects.
Weather and
They always
maintenance.
say 20 years and you gotta replace it. But
No, that's not
sometimes you bring contractors up there that actually look at the existing conditions and say, well, this roof isn't that bad.
Yeah.
So that's why I want 2 contractors to look at the roof.
Mhm.
And if they say that we can get a few more years out of the roof, then fine. If the contractors go up there and say, you know, these 20 years on this roof have been hard years, and therefore this roof really should be replaced now, we'll take that into account, and I'm glad that.
Yeah, and certainly from what, and again, I'm going based off of the roof report and what we had talked about, and knowing that there is some leakage there. It was a high priority identified to us.
Right.
I want to get my guy on the roof too, because we've gone to other districts where I've got school districts where there's blisters growing and there's trees growing out of the blisters. And you want to talk about a roof that needs to be replaced. That's a roof that needs to be replaced. Yours are certainly not in that condition, and with good maintenance could easily last a few more years, but it's one of those things, it's kind of that ticking time bomb. When is it gonna, is it gonna go, is it not
What we
gonna
don't want
go?
is water inside
Yeah,
classrooms.
correct.
Right.
That are, dripping, so we want to be ahead of that curve, but certainly any roof that's more than 20 years old, we're
Deserves
in
some
jeopardy
scrutiny.
potentially, and that's
Right,
why.
it's just
we
a matter
need
of
to
what,
have
it's
very-
not a matter
very
of
closely
if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
So by the 17th, you will have talked to these 2 contractors, and you're
Correct.
going to compile their information and present it to the board.
Right.
Got it.
Okay,
That's
so,
the plan.
yep, let's review the game plan. Is that the paving core test can just go right ahead and be set up?
I'd
with
like
the-
to do that starting tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll contact my engineer and tell him to get moving on it.
Okay, and then the
Get that
roofing,
scheduled.
we'll come to the regular meeting agenda on February 17th
Mm-hmm.
to see what the 2 contractors said, and we make a decision on that date.
Yep, sounds fair.
And then life safety and accessibility in March. Sound good?
Is that a good timeline for you to
Yeah,
get by March?
that's fine. Oh, absolutely, yeah, that's not a problem.
All right, very good. All right, so moving off that, questions about 208 and that setup, is that what we're covering next?
Sure. I guess the question I had is there anything that David, you or the architect has to comment on? As far as, I wasn't sure to what extent that you guys had reviewed the proposals and the, situation with Hollywood School.
Well, I'll introduce, the topic in the sense that I'm confident that we've had good cooperation and good communications with Riverside Brookville High School. The architects I worked with for 11 years, DLA architects. So I have a lot of confidence in that firm. And I think there were certain areas that Paul was comfortable getting into, and some areas that he, was less comfortable, because then you're opining on another architect firm's, where they have the responsibility. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Right, so I met with, I had a conference call. We tried to schedule a meeting, but it just wasn't working out for everybody. But I'm currently working with Nicholas and Associates, who's the construction manager on the project. I've been working on him on another project, so I was in his office all week last week. We were able to get Carrie from DLA on the phone. Had a conference call that was on the 26th, I believe, in the morning, and we talked about basically all the different. We kind of went over the project scope and what measures they're putting in place, and just the overall lay of the land and overall project schedule, and what was going on. And I was told by Carrie that and by Joe that Mr. Papadopoulos that they had met with the Hollywood staff to talk about where the fence would go, and just basically gave me the lay of land that currently right now there's an existing grandstand that's on a concrete base. They're putting one back in kind. There's actually a rendering, I believe, I attached to the correspondence I sent over to David. It's going to be a brick structure underneath, enclosed for storage, and then the bleacher structure sitting on top of that. They're actually moving it 8 feet further toward the high school. because they want to get a walk area behind, so they're actually going to be building it further away from your property, which is nice. But during demolition, they need to get close to it because they have to get that down and dismantled. And the best way to do that and protect cars and kids is to have a fence that they're going to have coming off the corner of the school, which is a side that has no windows. I talked to Joe, and he said also that they're putting in they had a company come out, Multivista, that did a complete documentation of the school for the existing conditions to make sure, and they're also putting in, which he said they've never done before, they're putting in a vibration monitoring system near the building to make sure that there's no excessive measures to the building, and then if by chance something does happen and a teacher or the principal reports that there had been some damage or something happened, then they would be able to go back and document and look at the photographs and see if it was something that was pre-existing or if it was something that was caused by the construction, and then also with the aid of that monitoring equipment. In terms of the stormwater, I know they had gone through the village. This doesn't fall under MWRD. I think I'd sent David an earlier correspondence that talked about that. That's not the case. It is through the village. And when DLA went to them, because they were I believe they're at 95% documents right now for the bidding of the project, but the demolition work's moving forward right now. They said that the village came back and they had detention put in, even though that's now the new standards, Cook County and DuPage County. They don't really need to put storage in, but they were having problems with the existing system backing up into their field, causing damage. That's why they're doing this replacement. They're putting in measures to do that. They're actually storing double what the village asked them to store double what they had been planning on storing, so that they can handle, I believe they said it's about a 93% reduction in flow rate back into the sewer system to minimize impact on that. So they have to handle the stormwater on site. That's that's code. That's what they have to do. Sounds like that's what they're doing. And then I believe there was some correspondence that came out, David, you shared with me, that we got from Riverside Brookfield regarding the use of the tennis courts.
Well, I guess the proximity of the tennis courts to the school is 70 feet.
Right, it's cold. It's basically the depth of their parking lot currently,
And
closer, just because they were expanding their parking as part of the project.
And I know that there are some, there may be students with special needs or with, attention challenges, and, tennis balls being, noisy during the school day might be an issue. In this recent correspondence, the school board president said that they weren't going to be holding PE classes.
Yeah.
So that basically means that we don't have the jeopardy of a noise nuisance, and I think that's a very positive gesture on the part of District 208 to understand that while classes are being held in Hollywood, that there would be that potential if they had a couple of 40-student PE classes out there in such close proximity to the building. But they're basically saying that they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Right, and with the new layout, they're putting more track and field, like the long jump and high jump pole vault in that area, which kind of makes that area less usable for PE classes. What was there previously was discus, and it was open grass field. So they could have kids out playing softball for gym or for PE. With the way it's set up now, it's really not conducive to it. So I believe they also referenced in that letter that would actually be less use in that zone than it currently is.
Yeah, and I have that letter
Yeah,
in
you guys
front of me now,
have a
and
copy
that's
of that, yeah.
that's exactly what he said. There's actually gonna be less activity there than there have been in the past.
The letter is from?
Matt, I asked him.
Is that the one that you shared with us? The
Yeah.
same one? Okay.
Yeah.
When we were asking if they could send someone to give a presentation.
Yeah,
So,
that was-
yeah.
Some of the concern was.
Yeah. And so, of course, and obviously, being good neighbors, it's definitely their responsibility. All the contractors are insured and bonded and licensed, so any damage they are responsible to pay for. It's kind of a, standard operating procedure, no
Sure.
different than anyone building even next to your house if a neighbor was doing an addition to their house, so.
Have you seen the elevations and the site plan?
Yeah, I've seen a concept plan.
Yeah. There's an elevation now a west elevation of the bleacher that's on the District 208.
Right, yeah, I saw those.
Yeah, and it's quite an extensive, it's a longer building than it was previously. It kind of
I believe when I talked to Carrie, I'd asked her, and she said it was going back in it's the same size, is what she had said. So I wasn't able to compare it, because I don't have any information on it, but she said it was going back basically in kind.
Well, I don't think that's,
And I mean, we could
I don't
certainly
think that's
ask.
the case. Could you look into that?
We can check into it, sure. But again, it's kind of their project, so I
Yeah.
don't know how much.
Well, sure,
we have on that, but-
it's just that we, we're the neighbor.
Correct.
And we're 8 feet away. You say that.
Well, 8 feet, no, it's going to be 8 feet further away, yeah.
8 feet further away. Okay.
Right.
So maybe we're 9 feet away now, because I think they were.
Yeah, they were kind of like right up against that edge of the parking lot.
Right.
Where it was, so I think probably at least a foot off the property line. But
Yeah. So Art, we, the issue of a presentation of the board being able to look at graphics, is that something that's possible yet?
I don't think that's going to happen. What I did do is provide links to the plans that were submitted to the Village of Brookfield for the zoning and planning board. And then also links to the high school rbhs208.net, which is where they are publishing their documents. There's actually a lot more detail in what was provided to the Village of Brookfield than what's on the RBHS website. So I don't think we're going to have that kind of a presentation. I'm not prepared to give it, because it's, again, the high school is the one with the plans. I think, just by way of update, really quickly, I did attend the Brookfield Zoning and Planning public hearing. Mary Rose was there as well. They did not, the board, the Zoning and Planning Board did not approve the project. They didn't act on the project at all. It was requested to have some additional studies and information provided, and they've basically teed up another public hearing in March. So that there's more to come there. And of course, the way these things work is even if and when the Planning Commission makes a recommendation and takes official action, that will go to the Brookfield Village Board, who can then vote however they want. It's not a binding recommendation. So just to quickly recap a couple of things that were asked for. There is a parking study available in that packet and on the District 208 website, but the Planning Commission asked for a kind of more extended traffic study over more different days or different times of day. They asked for a photometric report of how the parking lot lighting is going to, impact the area. A landscape study, which it really wasn't provided in any meaningful way at all yet. Am I forgetting anything?
Just a more extended parking study.
And a parking study, well, there wasn't a parking study done, so
Yeah.
that was something new that the Planning Commission asked for. So looking at the high school property and the area around it and what the parking situation is throughout the day on different days. So that's, there's quite a bit there. The high school said we'll get that together and we'll come back, have another public hearing. So obviously more to come on that. I just want to take the opportunity right now, David, and I'm sorry, Mr. Pressetti, I really appreciate your reaching out and working with the high school district. I really do actually, even though I've had some frustrations with it, I think they've made an effort, especially the superintendent, Dr. Skinkis. I'd like to thank Bobna as well as Mr. Preble, who have, principal of Hollywood, who have been, working closely and trying to keep those lines of communication up. I just want to thank you very much for that, because I just feel like this project was kind of barreling down the line, and we were kind of, just in the headlights and not knowing what was
Right.
going on. And I think we're getting a lot better information there.
All right, very good. Thank you
All right, you're
for your time, and look forward to passing that on February. We're getting the construction update on the roof on the 17th, and we'll go from there.
All right, absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Final agenda item is the budget guidelines for fiscal year 2015-2016 by David.
In the interest of time, I will try and go through a lot of pages quickly. But this is a document that I'm accustomed to. Does anyone need a copy of this document, first of all?
This was in the packet. Yeah, I didn't bring mine, sorry.
Thank you.
Can I have one?
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go. In there, got it. Got it, okay.
Be married.
Thank you.
So, this document is what I'm accustomed to producing in conjunction with the audit. The fiscal audit, which was just completed and which would have been presented by the auditor, is incorporated into the information that's being converted into spreadsheets and specific analyses, historical, and some qualitative information also. In an audit, there's a section known as the management discussion and analysis section, and this includes information that is intended for the board to see from a broad brush overview, as well as discussion of certain economic factors and historical conditions that are pertinent to the current financial condition. Then we have this other document, which I'll get to after I talk about this one for a little bit. And this was distributed to board members to give you an idea of what kind of hoops we're going to be jumping through and how communications with principals and anyone else with budget development responsibility, how all that will be handled and managed in terms of collecting the information and making sure that we're developing a very accurate fiscal year 2015-16 budget. So I'm going to page through this quickly, but let me get to one of the most important. Let's see. This is a very big document with only one specific purpose, and that is to ask the board's permission to proceed with communicating to those that are developing the budget some budget guidelines. So budget guidelines are necessary for the board to review, and I have a recommendation at the bottom of page 1. And then so page 1 is meant to be an executive summary. So I'm proposing that the school district communicate to those developing the budget and say that we're looking at a 2% growth factor in relation to the current year budget, an 8% growth factor moving forward over 2 fiscal years and adjusting for inflation and enrollment growth. And going back to 12-13, you would bring forward those costs. Let's see, and I'm going to flip to page 11. Because page 11 gives you an idea to how this really works, because when developing the budget, it is a healthy thing to have a use it or lose it philosophy. Because if in the history of the use of a given account number, the use drops off, that's an indication that maybe that money is not needed for the purposes is defined in that account number. So at the bottom, for example, I'm looking here where it has account number 5410, and there's a 3-year history of activity in that account of $1,000, $500, and $1,000. That would, using these formulas, generate what I'm would call a budget guideline amount, or what I term a comparison formula of $887. The reason why it comes up to $887 is because in 2013-14, there was a dip in the actual spending. So what I'd like to do is proceed with the budget development process, generally speaking, applying a 2% factor, but then as you go back in time, the factor has to be larger because you're adjusting not only for inflation, but also for enrollment growth. In the upper left-hand corner, we're seeing the enrollment growth factors, and you've had some significant enrollment growth going from 1,565 to 1,695. We're using October 1 child counts in these percentage growth factors and the enrollments. And then you combine with that with the fact that the tax cap inflation factor has been, those percentages that are listed. I like to say that if your enrollments were absolutely stable and you didn't add one student, but you had a 2% inflation, then your costs would have some tendency to be towards a 2% growth. If you had 0 inflation, but you had 2% per year more students to teach, then there's a cost consequence for enrollment growth. So when you combine those factors, in actuality, where I'm recommending that we operate on the basis of 10%, 8%, and 2%, in purely the mathematical interpretation, it would be 13.77%, 10.17%, and 3.87%. So why am I proposing a lower percentage? Because I'm a business official and I want to squeeze the turnip. There are economies of scale that one can achieve even though enrollment growth occurs. You want to realize as much as you can in terms of economies of scale, and my past experience is you don't try and plug these numbers right into the comparison formula. You put out lower percentages because you're challenging the people who are developing the budget to be as frugal and as economical as possible. But I wouldn't want to go under those numbers because they are lower than what the school district is experiencing when you combine inflation and enrollment growth. So that's all a big explanation about the bottom of page 1. So I've only achieved explaining one page so far.
And I already have a question. Can
Okay,
I just
sure.
shoot it at you? It's pretty general, which is the use it or lose it approach. Given that, how do you set up a system where you mitigate the impulse of certain areas in the organization to spend down their money so they don't lose it, even though whatever they're spending it down on might not be the optimal, most cost-effective or most reasonable way to spend money.
You tell them not to, and then you enforce it.
Okay.
And that's in this document.
Okay.
Generally speaking, it's stated here, when you develop a budget, it's for the needs for this fiscal year.
Okay.
And if you're at the end of, let's say in May, you're buying supplies and materials and equipment for next year, that's contrary to what the intention of a budget management system is supposed to achieve. Therefore, we shut down spending except for purposes that are examined and are essential to finish the year, about mid-April. So we're not gonna buy any more equipment, we're not gonna put, we're gonna curtail spending in all categories, starting about mid-April. To ensure that basically we can close the audit, for one thing, and we don't have a lot of purchase orders or expenditures that are dangling out there that might carry over the next fiscal year. And we wanna make sure that people adhere to the philosophy that when we're developing the budget, you really should spend most of your money towards the beginning of the fiscal year, because what you're spending should be benefiting the educational processes during that year. And that's kind of clearly stated in the budget guidelines.
Okay.
So the rest of the pages I'll flip through pretty quickly, as quickly as I can. Page 2 is your table of contents. Page 3, I invite you to read page 3, wordsmith it to your, to your comfort level. It's basically your philosophical statements. Page 4, and just to let you know, this is a document that I like to think it would be useful for a new board member or someone who just wants to get accustomed to, looking at how the numbers fit together and where, in this case, we're looking at the biggest, highest level of an overview. Where does the money come from and how is it used? Okay, so that I think is an important pie chart. Page 5 is offered for, I hope every board member will take time to read through the narrative on pages 5 and 6, where we get into some discussion of the strengths and problem areas, and certainly I'd be glad to answer any questions about the strengths and problem areas that are presented. I'm mentioning Senate Bill 16 in this, and the proviso Township Treasurer's Office situation. I think we've talked about private placement tuition, how that cost has grown. I have a spreadsheet on that later on in the document. What has happened to interest income over the years, medical dental benefits costs, declining EAV and increased tax rates, general economic uncertainty. So those are all important kind of bullet point topics for an understanding of the current financial condition of the district. Historical and ongoing financial considerations are, a discussion of the tax cap in some general ways.
What page is that?
Page 8.
Okay.
Looking at tax rates and some historical information about the 2004 referendum, what happened then. So I think it's just important to try and encapsulate all these factoids, so to speak, that relate to the historical situation. On page 9, I pulled language from your debt certificates issuance, what was described as the reason why that money was accumulated and spent, what types of projects were done. That's something that I for my own purposes, need more detail on. Page 10 is a budget calendar. These are our target dates to administer the budget development process, leading all the way up to even what process will follow to file the next tax levy. Page 11, I've already kind of gone through that page. Page 12 is historical revenues. Your equalized assessed valuation right now in 2013 is only a little bit better than it was in 2004. That's a challenging financial characteristic of the school district. And your tax rates have gone up substantially because of the declining EAV. Of course, we've discussed this through the levy process. Also, how are we doing with general state aid and corporate personal property replacement taxes or other primary or major sources of revenue? So you've got all that history right in front of you. I like to call, let's see. No, this is salaries, breaking into categories, salaries, benefits, total salaries and benefits are your people costs. And then tuition and other really relates to special education. And that's a major growth category. If you look at 1998-99, that was a $137,000 cost, and it reached a high in 2013-14 at $2.378 million. That's a problem area for the school system in terms of cost control.
This is the tuition for outplacement special ed?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is not, like I mentioned before, this is not unique to District 96. There, school districts, I've looked at the annual financial reports of school districts over some time, and I think there's like a 7 or 8% compounded growth factor that's typical in outplaced tuition. Our growth factor, though, is an average of 17.4%. So that's pretty. That's, you know, I'd say that's significantly challenging. But I'm also I guess I'm impressed with Pam Shaw. I think she's got a good handle on this cost category, and she certainly understands.
David, with regard to that, we increased our special ed staff last year, right?
Well, related services.
Pardon me?
Related services, like we brought back social workers and psychologists.
Would any of, okay, so that wouldn't be a reduction in tuition, or would that, another, what would, that was supposed to achieve a reduction for us somewhere.
In salaries for LADSI.
All right, well, where does that show up, in tuition?
That column is titled total tuition / other. The / other part of that does include LADSI.
Okay, so would we be able to tell what we, you know, I don't know if you've done this calculation, what we increased our expenditures on the staff that we hired, and did we see an offset in that tuition other column?
I've seen a spreadsheet on that, and I can follow up with you. I think there were two proposals last year, and the final result was a fairly limited number of additional special education teachers.
Right, we just did the related services.
So, but I
We
can
brought
follow up
some,
with
we
you
brought
on that
an early childhood
comparison.
teacher, we, increased it by one early childhood teacher. We'll go through the numbers, actually, I don't have them in front of me, as far as what did we reduce, but we reorganized some things too.
It was a fairly limited scope.
Okay.
From what I saw. I think that there was an initial presentation that had a larger scope, and the final change to the operation was, I would say, pretty moderate.
Okay. But how many people were involved, 6 or 7?
I don't have the information in front of me, so we'll
All
get
right,
back to you.
I'm just trying
I think it
to,
was more like 3 or 4. I think the first was, I think, 8 or 9, maybe even more people.
Well, we wanted to bring everybody back, so I know we went through a couple of scenarios, so
Okay.
we'll finalize it.
So David, you mentioned that this outplacement tuition cost is growing 17% for us, right? And in other districts, it's about 7 or 8%. I think you made that comment.
Yes, a number of years ago, I studied a whole set of districts and looked at what information I could get from the AFRs from all those districts, and look at how their costs were growing in this category to see what was happening to the school district I worked for was mirrored elsewhere, and the answer to that was pretty much yes, it is fairly much mirrored elsewhere. I think school districts are using those services more than in the past, and it carries a cost. And then there's a certain level of frequency and severity that drives this cost. In many, many cases, the school district, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, has to address those students' needs. And if you have a student with, for example, a combination of autism and Down syndrome, or something that is challenging for an in-house special education staff to really address, then the best option is an outplacement.
Yeah. I guess I was just wondering if that 17% that we're growing in that area, does that mirror similar districts, presently?
Yeah, I'd have to redo the study.
Yeah,
But
I'm not
I think
giving
this
you-
is probably on the high side, but I can do that. I mean, I could spend some time looking at some of our comparable districts and seeing, there's only so far back that I can go to get those AFRs from the city of Illinois. But yes, I think it is worth continuing to monitor how we're lining up. I think 1.522 million, which is in the most recent 2014-15 year, and which seems to be something that is developing. In other words, I'm not going to come back to you and say, well, we budgeted 1.522 million, but we've spent 2.3 million. That's not happening. I mean, right now it looks like we're pretty much aligning with the budget, fingers and toes crossed.
Right.
But that's a number that is, that's a 36% drop from the prior year. So all I'm saying is, or what I would like to emphasize rather, is that no one has a crystal ball regarding how this cost is going to develop, and it's going to be driven by factors that are in many ways outside of our control. Severity and frequency of students with high-level needs.
Now, are some of these costs reimbursed by the state?
Yes.
David,
So
did these,
can we see also with additional information you're going to present us, maybe you could show us the offset as well?
I've developed a spreadsheet in the past that shows the revenue side and the expenditure side, shows the net. My guess is that you're picking up about 30% funding from the state. 70% of this cost is going to remain local.
Okay.
It's still going to be a local burden in that respect.
David, does the increase relate to an increase in the student population that fit in that category?
Yeah.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
Frequency and severity. Frequency meaning the numbers of.
Okay.
Are there these outpatient or outplaced schools, I guess you would call them, different locations and stuff? Are there a number of those that our professionals can pick from to send a student? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense. Do we have an option? Do we have any options there, and where we send the students?
I'm going to be brutally
I
honest with you.
I can answer that. I
Oh,
mean,
go ahead.
We have limited options, and it's ultimately the team's recommendation if, let's just say, a child is being outplaced for behavior issues. There might be 2 or 3 tuition-based programs that are in the area. The parents go visit, they find what's the best placement for them, and that's what the team has to come to an agreement on it. But they're relatively comparable.
Relatively comparable in cost?
In cost, correct.
Yeah, okay.
But there's a good chance that the team makes a recommendation, and if the parent is not comfortable with that recommendation, the parent will call an attorney, and they'll enter into a process of negotiation.
So-
That does happen. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that happens very rarely here, but on the other hand, what I'm trying to emphasize is that the parent's comfort level has to be achieved or you may have
Yeah.
a contest of opinions about how to best meet that
Sure,
student's needs.
yeah. So it's not all up to the professional. It's, again, a parent can lobby and say, I don't want my child to go here, I'd like him to go to this other facility.
And in many cases, that's very, I don't know, appropriate, because some of these facilities specialize in students with a particular type of challenge. And so, the parents know that. They're strong advocates for their children.
Yes.
In most cases.
No, also, one of the options is having their needs addressed here. That's also one of the things that are weighed.
If we have the resources to do it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, well, can we do it here, or these other two outplacement options? So that's all part of the mix.
Correct, and most of the time, if we're talking outplacement, it's because we can't meet their needs here.
Needs here.
So on page 13 at the bottom, I think it's, kind of amazing to me that in the year 2003, 2004, and 2002, 2003, your cumulative balance in the educational and operations and maintenance fund went negative, and then another year only had $50,000. So basically in 2002, 2003, and 2003, 04, the school district was out of money. Undoubtedly, the public understood that, passed the referendum, and now the school district is in very good financial condition. And I think now is a good time for the school district to make financial plans for stability. We're going into the future with a good balance of revenues and expenditures and meeting all of your needs, especially keeping in mind your capital outlay needs that the architect is going to identify through things like life safety and your expectations for the quality of our facilities. But either way, certainly, I think the level of support that the community has provided is admirable, as is shown on page 13. Page 14 is your cumulative fund balances in all funds combined. So it's basically taking the previous page and going into a little bit more detail and covering all of the operating funds, including working cash, the IMRF and transportation, and the total. Page 15 shows how the school district has been operating 08-09 to 14-15 from staffing. And this is just something that I cut and pasted from our human resources record keeping. And certainly it's showing growth in the numbers of staff. That growth in many cases is going to coincide with your enrollment growth. And in some cases, I'm assuming that there are resumptions of, say, staffing levels that were cut back due to having a period of significant financial challenge. But I think this is an important document for the board to see every year and track how your staffing has been playing out. On page 16, this is the one that I like to call financial management report card, because it's comparing budget to actual. If the person in my job is presenting a budget and it plays out very much in line with what was budgeted, then the variances, the budget to actual variance, would be relatively minor. In total, I am not. I wouldn't be satisfied with this being my track record, because there's a pretty large variance. If you look at the combined general funds budget to actual, you have a 6-year average of $3.38 million. I would shoot for something, more in the 3 to 4 to 5%. This is a significantly larger variance than I would be comfortable with. Therefore, the goal here is to propose a budget that is going to play out. And at the end of the year, the actual results are reasonably close to what was presented as a budget. So all I'm saying is that I've been doing this job for 21 years, and I would want a smaller variance than what I'm seeing on this page. Page 17. This is the exact chart that you've seen before. But I think it's important to incorporate into a document like this, which is intended to be somewhat comprehensive as far as a look at how the school district is functioning financially. Page 18 is school report card comparisons. We're showing that our operating cost per pupil is actually less than the state at $11,928 as compared to the state at $12,045. So all I'm doing is copying and reporting what I'm seeing in the school report cards. Page 19, for those that are just new to school district fund accounting, is defining how our fund accounting system is defined. And the most important document for me on a daily basis is the Illinois Program Accounting Manual. Just making sure that we're in conformity with how the state says we should classify revenues and expenditures. Page 20 is just where we stand with our tax rates, something to update every year. And then I have an updated financial, I'm sorry, the next section is all about financial projections. And I don't know if we want to get into all that much detail about an updated financial projection, but I certainly, would answer questions that you may have. Starting out with the same budget progress statement that you're getting on a monthly basis. Okay, so how are we developing this year? And then I have modified the financial projection based upon some favorable results that are indicating that our budget was high on salaries, and actually right now it's looking like it's a little low on purchase services. But the net result is that we're going to be have a year that, if the same trends continue, will be about $712,000 of the variance to the good for the school district. So that's a good place to be. So I've made some modifications to the financial projection, and on page 23, if you look at the revenues percent increase, I've got total revenues growing out in the future at a pretty modest rate of 5.1%. That's larger. The majority of that is in property taxes, and that's based upon the the tax year 14 tax levy, calculating that out. And then going on into the future, using the most recent CPI results for school districts. And then if you look at the percent increase on the expenditure side, 8.9% in 14-15, 5.4% in 2015-16, 2.8%, 3.2%, 3.3%. So, overall, those are the percentages that I'm tracking. And the reason why we see an eroding of our cumulative, or rather, the amount of money that we're putting away towards our cumulative balance is because revenues are expected to be less in a growth factor as compared to our expenditures.
What page is that, David, that you're looking at?
Page 23. This is a conservative financial projection, and I will, through the budget development process, continue to look at this and make sure that these pieces are coming together. But, you know, even as we're looking at the area of tuition, it's a fluid process, and we'll continue to monitor it using this tool.
I do have a question about, throughout this, the current budget, you know, process that you define, and then in the projections here, there's student enrollment. I didn't see any narrative on student enrollment trends, or if you've used some kind of, you know, thinking about how to come up with the projections. And I'm wondering, I mean, I think this is an awesome document. I find it very useful and helpful. But that was one area where I wasn't sure if you had more material to work with, or
Well,
any parameters you're thinking about.
There is a row titled student enrollments and percentage increment.
Right.
And the factor that I'm using is 1.2% and 1.1%, 1.2%. That is a speculative number, and I have no scientific backup for that, which is why we've engaged Dr. Casarda. And as soon as Dr. Casarda provides his Series B projection, goes right into here.
Okay.
And we use the Casarda numbers to drive the, you know, the interpretation within this. It's built into this document.
Okay, because yeah, even the numbers that are right here on this page, I mean, 2010, it's 11%, you know, increase over the prior year. I mean, we've seen some real interesting numbers up and down, so.
You know, in 2018-19.
I don't see any negative numbers, so.
Right, in 2018-19, this projection, you know, as it's constructed here, is saying we'll have 1,776 students.
Yeah.
I'll be fascinated to see what Dr. Casarda comes up with. From a financial management perspective, I hope it's no bigger than that number.
Yeah.
Because that,
Well, we're already having.
it generates challenges.
Yeah.
David, just a couple of quick questions. You had mentioned, you know, I'm looking back on page 3, some of our budget philosophy and assumptions, and you said you would like some feedback on some of these things, or you would invite feedback. What would be the vehicle if we had questions or comments on any of these, the best vehicle to provide these to you?
It would be productive for board members to email Dr. Sharma Lewis or me, or both of us.
Yeah.
And then we would assemble board member suggestions and then bring them back for discussion. And then I think many of these are pretty straightforward and, you know, generally applicable to the public school setting. But I'm not married to anything that's in this language, and if there's a greater comfort level with expressing a particular concept or adding some concepts, I think it would just be important that the board reach a consensus and agree that that's something we want to change on this page.
Okay, or so in general, any feedback on these documents that we have been provided today? Just email me and either ask questions or make comments, and then I'm just looking at the thing, Board of Education will reduce fees and expenses. Have we increased any fees in the last, well, since I've been on the board? I know from time to time something's come up, but.
No, to my recollection, we've always kept fees. The only thing we've raised is lunch.
Yeah, okay, that's, all right, yeah, okay.
But as far as, you know, normal fees, it's something we just have not done.
And then I'm just kind of looking at, what does co-curricular mean? I mean, I know-
Activities, after school.
Oh, okay. So that's,
that are curriculum-based, not sports-based.
Okay. Can you give me an example? That co is kind of throwing me.
Like Mr. Taraka was talking about at the education meeting, there's 2 STEM offerings that are happening right now, the robotics class and the computer programming. So it's co-curricular, meaning it's in addition to the curriculum we're providing.
In my past practice, that would mean everything to do with athletics and activities and anything that, IHSA, you know, anything that's not part of the daily academic and regular educational experience of students.
So we would say these are co-curricular activities might apply more to the middle school than the elementary school,
Yes.
and they might be electives. How much would they be, electives versus required?
Well, they're all electives. They're all after-school activities.
These are all after school, okay. But they are not athletics, they're,
And some of them are athletics too.
okay.
I mean, they're
But so the STEM classes that we've talked about are after school?
correct.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the Board of Education is responsible for a free and appropriate public education, and anything that is under that umbrella would not be considered co-curricular.
What was that again?
A free and appropriate public education,
Free and appropriate?
FAPE. They call it FAPE, free
Okay.
and appropriate public education.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the Board of Education is responsible for providing FAPE to all students within its attendance boundaries. Co-curricular is a gray area. The board can voluntarily fund, but it's not part of FAPE. A student that wants to be a member of a sports team, the school district can charge fees for a student to be on the football team or the softball team or things like that. It's not a legal obligation to provide co-curricular experiences for students, generally speaking.
Yeah. We could also approve or disapprove any after-school activities. Yeah.
You oversee everything to do with the school district's interactions with kids. What I'm referring to is what the district is obligated to provide, and you couldn't cut it if you wanted to. You do have to provide a free and appropriate public education. Some school districts just do away with all sports when they get into financial difficulty. So, but I think this school district is in such a good financial condition that, requesting the board to approve an increase in any fees, I would anticipate that being a hard sell, because we're in good shape.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's this document, and then the other thing that I'd like to just make you aware of, this is going to go out tomorrow. The meeting with the principals, anyone who has budget development responsibility. They'll be handed a black binder, and at the end of the process, they have to turn it in. And I do want to just show you these screenshots where the last 3 pages of this document, you can see that there's a computer tool that they're working with that encourages zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting means that you get zero unless you justify it. And you must itemize and explain, and I want to make it as easy as possible for those explanations and itemizations to take place. And here's an example on the second of the screenshots that shows, somebody having written a lot of explanation for only $765. And then the last page is showing how, in addition to having explanations for the proposed budget amount, we have a feature in the program that requires them to prioritize any new and replacement equipment items. So I'll challenge the principals to say that it's essential. We cannot function acceptably in the 2015-16 school year unless we buy this equipment. So that would be the first category. Then I have priority 1 and priority 2. And I, like to say to them that, you're welcome to document all of your needs going on, if you want to give me your 3 or 4 year plan. But those things that are deferrable, make sure you put a priority 2 there, because we all are going to understand that that's probably not going to get funded this year. A lot of times, a lot of requests will come in, we look at the budget, we have to say, okay, we need to prioritize within the budget. And so this prioritization process is very helpful in that regard. And then, of course, when all of the budgets are assembled, the district office will see how the results and the initial draft of the budget is fitting within the financial projection and the district's projection of revenues. And if there's a challenge presented by how the budgets have been presented, then we have to develop cuts and decide, where will we trim back, where will we talk to the person who's proposing this additional spending and saying, well, what can you really live with, what's top priority, maybe there's another way of achieving the same goal at a lesser cost. Maybe we'll take on some serious shopping challenges.
Is this where your zero-based budgeting approach, which you've just described, was meet your comparison formula?
Yes. And the comparison formula is actually built into the program, so that the person that's filling out their budget sees that it's in a column titled formula. And I like to say to people, if you give me a budget that is where the dollar amount you're proposing is identical to the formula, I'll probably feel okay about that, because it's consistent with budget guidelines, and I'll probably be able to produce a budget that will match our financial limitations. On the other hand, I don't want anybody to submit a budget that hasn't been very well thought out. So I anticipate that from year to year, there will be changes in educational programs or student preferences or the way we're delivering instruction, and then those will be reflected, and they won't have anything to do with the comparison formula. So I like to explain that is advisory, and it's meant to be a tool for you to see, this would be kind of a purely mathematically driven formula, and it's up to you to then explain if you need to go beyond it with very good statements of justification and maybe an opportunity for us to dialogue. But if I were to take every account that is in conformity with the comparison formula and set them aside and concentrate on only those accounts that didn't conform to the comparison formula, I'm making progress, because then I'm operating on a management by exception basis and working where there's probably the need for us to peel back layers of the onion and find out why there's an expressed need for more than what would be considered normal proposed dollars for that particular account.
Is this the first time that you've used this particular program for the administrators to complete? The screenshots that you've shown us?
Sure, I wasn't, I didn't have any of this going for the development of this budget because I just started in August.
Right.
But this particular program, at my former employer, when somebody would start the program, they would be able to look back to the year 2003 and see how the budget was developed each individual year with all the detail, because we did this exact same process for all of those years. So there's a benefit to looking at the history of how the budget was proposed. At the end of this, if I'm going to continue, they actually have to sign a piece of paper that says, this is my submitted budget, and then if next school year they say, well, that's not what I thought I asked for more money. I was like, no, here's what you signed. On this date, this is where, I want to emphasize to them that don't submit your budget unless you are committed to this and know that this is what we're going to use.
This has not been in use prior to you coming here.
Correct. So that's it for the budget development process. Based on what I'm sensing, I can go ahead with a 2%, 8%, 10% is presented in terms of budget guidelines. I'll build that in the comparison formula, and then we'll get back to you after the budget process is further along, and let you know how things are conforming, hopefully, with the financial projections and our overall expectations for revenues.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Just to finish up, future meeting dates, February 17th will be our regular business meeting. March 3rd, 2015 will be our Education Committee meeting at the Learning Resource Center at Hauser. March 17th, regular business meeting will be at O'Malley's Pub. We have to change that, so. All right, very good. Without thing, may I have a motion to adjourn the February 3rd Finance Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Excuse me. Juliet Boyd, I'm sorry. Randy Brockway,
Yes?
Mary Rose Mangia,
Yes.
Rachel Morella,
Aye.
Michael O'Brien,
Yes,
Arthur Perry,
Aye.
Rich Regan.
Aye.
Motion is passed.
this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.